I'm ChosenArchitect, and this was Create Integrated. It all started here. Yes, in my humble little abode with Post Office Piggo. And this little create storage solution, boy, did it help us out in the beginning. But like all good playthroughs, I had to expand, and expand I did. And today I want to go over all of the things that I have done in my world, as this is technically the last episode of Create Integrated. Now, with this being the end and episode 40, of course, it is World Download Day. So if you're a supporter of any tier, be sure to get your World Download over on the Discord, no matter if you're a supporter on Patreon, on YouTube, if you're a supporter through the Discord, or even on Twitch. You get access to that channel, so be sure to check it out and download this world so you can play with it yourself. Now, the world tour is going to start where we started. This area right here. This is where we set up our crushing wheels. This is where we set up our first crafter, and this is where we set up all of our fans and processing, where we were originally using Starbuncle wheels. And I felt like this pack did a really good job. Well, I mean, I'm the one who made it, but did a really good job of helping you get into Create sooner. Instead of going through the vanilla grind, super grinding, you were able to get andesite and alloy really quickly. And that's usually one of the biggest holdbacks whenever you're trying to get into the Create mod. And I really wanted to be able to just get right on in there. So being able to just use the goo and then throw on some polished andesite, well, that made that process so nice. I mean, look at there, polished andesite now being produced and turned into blocks of andesite alloy. And like I said, that's what made this whole starting process so much easier. Now, every good starting area also needs a tree farm, and this tree farm has gotten me through to the end. This has been a fantastic tree farm, and I've been able to easily swap out all of the different components as needed. Like if I wanted spruce, I just swap spruce. If I wanted saplings from oak, I just put in some oak saplings. And by the way, if you do download the schematic, which is over on the Discord, by the way, just open to anyone, be sure to break and replace the deployers. I've seen a lot of people complaining about that, and that also includes any of the drill contraptions. Just be sure to break the deployer and then replace it back. Make sure you set your filters and what have you. That's been a common issue when using schematics, but it has worked fantastic. Just doing its job, just going back and forth, back and forth. Now, speaking of drill contraptions, let's not forget about the Cobble Gobbler. Yes, this bad boy honestly has made its way all the way to the end, and I never even needed to upgrade it. And it also had the ability to auto place torches, which is really, really cool, and can't wait to build more contraptions like this in the future whenever I do play other Create based packs. Also, again, you can find this schematic, of course, over on the Discord. Now, whenever you get started with Create, there is one thing that always looms over your shoulder, and that is the need for lava. And so my goal for lava was to, well, pull it from the Nether. And pulling it from the Nether, not quite the way you may think, because what I ended up doing was I ended up piping it into a system that is right over here and pumping the lava from an infinite source while also using lava to spin the pump power, yes, and then flinging buckets of lava through the Nether portal. Yeah. And then I dug a 10 by 10 by 100 deep hole. Yes. And I filled it with all of that lava. And this was literally done one bucket at a time, which now has two pumps actually pulling from it. If you didn't know, you can have more than one pump if you start to run low on your pump rate. I didn't know that, tested it here, and yeah, it works. Now, while I was letting this pool fill entirely with lava, I decided to build my starter workshop. This place right here is where all the magic has happened. And this workshop produces so many materials from literally cobblestone. And still to this day, it is powered exclusively from all of these water wheels, which I think this water wheel format not only looks really, really nice, but produces quite a bit of stress. Like, we are producing 65,000 SU from just these water wheels that are set up that only require water flowing straight down the middle. All of that is being used to power a workshop that produces everything from iron, gravel, sand, flint, clay, to more clay, more flint, also soul sand. This is producing gold. It's also producing nether quartz, and producing andesite, diorite, and even a bulk supply of cobblestone, which then a lot of this stuff is being routed around with frog ports and being sent to other facilities that we expanded upon. And we can't forget upstairs, which is actually used for our automation for our multiple different like staged processes that needed to happen in this pack. A good example to show this off would be to like request a few of the different mechanisms. Now this is one satisfying process that we definitely want to see take place. All of the items then get sent out, sent in their correct orientation, and then get stamped and pressed, and it goes through an entire process, thus completing all of our mechanisms. But now, by the time I had this place finished up, our lava was ready. And that's when I decided to set up our pump system, start setting up our first chain conveyors, and I set up the mega steam engine. And this steam engine, well, it consists of 6 boilers that are running off of liquid fueled blaze burners, all of which are setting at level 9, which is exactly where you would want them to be set, especially if you were just using lava to power your blaze burners. And yes, a singular water pump is more than enough to keep these satisfied. And this steaming behemoth, well, this bad boy is producing almost 1 million SU. Over 800, almost 900,000 stress units, so quite a lot. Now, after getting all of this set up and getting some chains running around, I decided, you know what? It might be a good idea to get into some sort of storage, which also meant we needed our first taste of power. And that's where we set up our motors on top of this setup to start producing a little bit of power, allowing us to get into refined storage. And in this pack, I wanted to utilize refined storage too, because it has some new features that I haven't gotten to play with in a lot of mod packs. So including it in here was a lot of fun. And I remember refined storage being quite tedious to automate processes within Create. And I wanted to showcase that that's no longer the case anymore. And so after getting into refined storage, I had myself a nice comfortable storage system and also had the ability to start auto crafting. And this is where the auto crafting with locking mode, which is a new feature in Refined Storage 2, really comes into play and has made all of the automations so much easier with Create. And what does locking mode do? Well, it essentially only sends a single batched craft of items at a time until all of those items are fully crafted, and then it will send another batch. And this makes automating things within Create so much better. All right, I know we're talking about boring old storage and you see dancing crabs over here. Let's go talk about these guys. But before we get into the dancing crabs, we should probably talk about why I even set up dancing crabs in the first place. And that was because this building right here, I set up to get into Ars Nouveau. As in my pack, Create Integrated here, you have to invite magic into your world, as it doesn't exist just innately. For example, you won't find trees and source trees or anything from Ars floating around the world in any biome gen. No, instead, you have to craft those things and craft all of this. And what we did was we started by making Lumazine, and then we also infused some Lumazine into some items. We were then able to use some Lumazine to create our first source setup, which, believe it or not, utilizes lava. And with all of this, we were able to create a piping network that allowed us to create source-related goods. And this was a lot of fun to do. Also, I ended up creating a loop system that allowed you to make all of the essences by simply looping the essences, making the essences a whole lot more useful inside of a survival sort of experience. I really wanted some of these things, for example, like the fire essence and many others, to be utilized because there's just a lot of cool recipes. For example, making magma blocks that I don't think get used in a lot of automations, or at least I've never used them in mod packs for block automation. And my idea behind this is if you've learned a magic, well, redoing that magic and making more of it shouldn't be that difficult of a process. Also in this building, I took advantage of the new rotation ability that can happen on almost all of the blocks from Ars Nouveau. I mean, just look at this. You can have platforms upside down, you can have the enchanting apparatus upside down, and I took full advantage of that. Oh yeah, and speaking of Ars Nouveau, it also is integrated with Create. Just take a look at this top hat. As I eventually worked my way into making some of the best Ars gear in the pack, and that is the Technomancer set, which gives you tons of benefits and tons of armor, and also well, more spell power, of course. Okay, I know you want to see the crabs or the alacarcanoids. These beautiful guys technically can automate from sand or gravel certain resources that you would normally have to brush up in the world. And this was my beautiful source of diamonds in this playthrough. As yeah, they just passively farm diamonds if you just give them some sand to brush, to blow, to bubble. They're definitely bubbling it. Now, just when I thought I was going to leave the Ars area, I can't leave it just yet. Now, this was a little later on in the playthrough, but a new block was recently added to Ars, and it's called the Planarium. And you can name, and it basically makes a pocket dimension that you can enter into. And inside here, I set up a Drigme farm that is producing a ton of resources for us. But this is, yeah, us inside of a containment jar. And you can build whatever you want inside of the containment jar, and it's reflected on the outside, which I thought was absolutely amazing. So I made this look like it was ripped out of the world. And yes, all of the Drigme stuff that we have in there is being displayed. Now to continue on, I want to show off my XP generator. We made a farm that generates experience for us, because at this point I really started to need enchantments. And that is exactly what this bad boy does. And you can see that I have a little hole over here that is allowing my little starbuncle to run over, grab some XP that is being produced from our farm, and drop it into this system, which keeps our experience tank filled. And we can even shut it off, and we have our little, gas station clerk. And this build was so much fun, and I got to utilize a new add-on mod, which adds the conduit cage. Yeah, which basically is conduit power and does special processes when fans blow on it. And this allowed me to produce a ton of lapis, but primarily a ton of XP, which I needed because I wanted to get into enchanting. Now, I didn't do any over enchanting or hyper enchanting. However, lightning has struck this, converting it into super experience. But the goal here was to be able to just simply duplicate XP books. And that is what we were able to do with this setup. But yes, I wanted to design it to make it look like a gas station, so I even have some little gas pumps with XP inside. Now, after I got all of those enchants, I was itching for some more expansion, and expansion I did and wanted to do. And I started to think, could I automate just about every ingot in the pack? And could I possibly do it in one building? And the answer to that is yes. And I present to you Foundry 2.0, where we are producing crimsite, viridium, azurine, and also ochrum. All of this, which is being produced for building materials, but also being converted into multiple different things: iron, copper, zinc, gold, and even electrum. And byproducts that are happening from this process are producing redstone, clay. We're also producing gunpowder and more nether quartz, which is fantastic. And also in this building, I decided to set up blaze cakes because they were needed for a couple of operations that happen here. For example, this, to be able to make the ochrum, we needed to have superheating happening inside of some water to simulate like high temps and pressure. And then over here, we also have this superheated, which makes the crimsite. Very, very cool. I had a lot of fun building all of this stuff down here, leading into a crushing wheel that then goes up into a washer that leads into a storage controller from Sophisticated Storage. I know you see this, and we are sucking blaze cakes up also to a second level, and that second level is kind of important. See, at this point, we were starting to get a little bit further into refined storage, and I wanted to start making modules that allowed bulk processing to happen. One of our first bulk processes, well, is going to be sheets. And we can make sheets for just about anything very, very quickly after getting our refined storage autocrafter set up. And this presses 4 at a time and then sends it along into a single barrel after collecting it and distributing it out. But now I also wanted mixing and pressing automations. And so this is a manual mixer where I can put 2 different products in, and then that ends up going in, or you can have it auto-crafted, and the auto-crafter will send it down into it via this barrel, and then all of the products ultimately end up back into our storage system. And then same thing happens over here for the press. It sends these ingredients out, They end up getting pressed and then get sent out, and same for the auto crafting. And I just love how cozy it feels over here. Like, this just feels so nice. But over here we have a draining solution. This was just a simple thing where we had to send Dragon's Breath to get it into a bucket. And then we have some more sequenced assembly. This one a little bit more complicated, as we divided separate inputs from one barrel, and that allowed us to make a very special ingredient that we needed to progress. Corium ingots. Yes, corium ingots were needed, and I can request a ton of these, by the way, now, but it did require us to go to the end because one of the ingredients is popped chorus fruit. And I did really want to go to the end, but it's also very useful and allowed us to progress through the pack by allowing us to get through Just Dire Things. And that was the whole point of the pack, was to kind of mix and blend every mod sort of needing each other throughout the playthrough. And so overall, I definitely recommend checking out these episodes if you want to see how all of this automation took place, because there is a lot of steps that are happening in this building. Now, after all of that sweaty hard work, I really wanted to work on something a little bit calmer. And I was like, you know what? Auto trading with villagers would be really fun. But coming up with a solution for how we were going to do that, well, that was the hard part. Ultimately, though, I did figure that out. And we have ourselves the trading floor automation, where we have a frog that is pulling flint through a hole into a storage. Flint then gets traded, it gets sent along, and then we have our trading depot that trades for the good from the particular villager that we want the goods from, and that makes its way into a villager. And I also had to make sure that I set up the building up here, which this is more than just the space for their sleeping quarters. It also houses storage for another farm that we ended up setting up. Now, none of these traders that are in all of these buildings would work. As you can see, we have an ender pearl one, we have one that produces wool, one that produces glowstone, and this one that produces apples. None of these would work if it wasn't for my cleverly disguised flint generator. And if you blinked, you might have missed it. The truck is actually generating the flint. Inside of this truck is a flint generation station, which allows our frog port to send packages out to our frogs, which then collect it. And by the way, these guys only work at certain times during the day. So yes, this produces plenty of flint for all of the trading. After building all of these buildings, I started to feel like we needed a farming area, and I did need a lot of resources for farming equipment. So I decided I was going to use Just Dire Things to create crops that automatically grow and harvest themselves, and then their collects get teleported to an inventory location. Where's those inventories located? Well, it gave me a good opportunity to actually build the upper areas of these rooms, and they are contained inside of the buildings, and they are linked. Every single one of those crops are linked to a very specific inventory. All of this doable because of Just Dire Things and the hoe from Just Dire Things, which has upgrades. Now, I had more on my mind than just, well, collecting crops. I also wanted to make seed oil, and seed oil I did have a plan to potentially use to make biodiesel. But that's when I realized that we may not need biodiesel to do the thing that I wanted to do, which was automate the wither. Which sounds kind of crazy, but all we needed to do was combine some different mob drops, which is why I built that Drigme farm, and combine that with some fluid that can be generated with XP and water. And all of that combined together allows us to make Nether stars. Yeah, now we have like almost 400 Nether stars. This was a fantastic farm for all of that. Now, I know the massive windmill is very hard to miss, but this windmill I actually didn't build. However, I did decorate because we ripped it from existence, which was oddly over here on that landmass. And we cut it using the cut paste gadget, and I pasted it right here, done some decorating, and then of course took a still structure and animated it. And by gluing the entire wind cell together, I was able to get this thing spinning and turn into something more functional. Tell you what, it's the small details like this that really make a world come together. Now, in the meantime, while I was setting all of that up, I also wanted to create automation for all of the different fan processes, and I found a clever solution. You can have items drop in front of a fan onto a girder and just let it sort of flow onto the girder. And then once it's done, just have it fall down into a chute. And these can fall down into inventories or what have you that all ultimately lead to a single location. In this case, it just leads back into a refined storage system. And believe it or not, all of this is being powered by a single Starbuncle wheel. Now, by this point, I had started to do a lot of automation. We had basically produced just about everything needed to really unlock a very powerful mod. This powerful mod, well, we needed to do a little bit more research on things and such of the types of matter. And research, boy, I had to do and had to set up. So thus, a research lab was born. But I had to get that research lab by blowing up this mountain. And right here is the research lab that is set up for the replication mod. Now, there was one problem. Before we could even get into replication, I needed to, well, automate time. But to do that, I have to essentially send a budding quartz block between every dimension, including one from the overworld, the Nether, and ultimately, well, the end. And this block right here produces, well, time crystals. With those time crystals, I was able to build a replication system. And the replication system essentially acts as like 3D printers, allowing us to discard essentially or disintegrate certain items into base material types. And those material types can then be transferred into other materials. So if I wanted, for example, a bunch of cyan dye, I could request it, and it's then going to 3D print it, which I think is really cool. But materials they do come at a cost. We had to burn some materials to be able to produce said materials. And you can see here all of the different materials that we are currently, well, kind of burning up. I should just say disintegrating. I mean, we're sending ender pearls, iron, we're sending quartz, we're sending technically yellow wool, clay, and even this one, which totems. We're literally burning totems. You know, the undying type. And this is where I said it was pretty powerful, because we also had the ability to hook it up to a refined storage system. So now we can request a lot of things. We can now request netherite scrap and netherite and all kinds of other materials that have a value associated to them. After, of course, we have burned them. Very much like Terraria, you have to burn a certain amount of them before you can replicate them. If you've ever played Terraria's journey mode, that is. But now, just when you thought I was done, and just when you thought that all of this was it wasn't. See, we still needed to technically get all of our tier 3 glyphs for our spellbook. And this spellbook has really come in handy, and there's been a lot of really useful spells that I have used along this journey. Before I could really unlock them, I wanted to build a special place to set up automation for the Wilden boss automation, and also automation for the enchanting apparatus. And so I present to you the Ars School of Magic, or the Ars Academy. Inside this building, a lot is technically taking place. Inside of here is where we have the Wilden boss automation, and I can request a tribute, and the tribute will automatically start by summoning a Wilden boss. And I better step out for this. It is very, very cool to watch this take place. It gets pushed onto a seat, and then it gets hit constantly with a very particular spell that only activates when the spell detects that there is a mob on the seat. And this does automatically kill it and automatically collects its drops. And you have the added benefit of you get to sit on the seat and watch it all happen. It's finally gone. But in my opinion, the real fun was automating things with starbuncles, which are an incredibly powerful and overlooked mechanic in Ars, I think. And these guys allow you to pull items out of barrels, place them into other containers, and pull them out. So it allowed us to easily automate the Mark of Technomancy with these guys. Because, I mean, just look at this. They are able to take all of the products, put them onto the platforms, sort all of the things, put them correctly, and then start the whole setup. It is so, so useful. And then when the craft is done, they get taken away and the task is complete. Then I couldn't help myself. I had to add an elevator that takes you up to the next floor, which takes you to the little tower room that we have up top. I had a lot of fun with this build. And before we get on to some other things, I do want to show you some spells that have been in my spell book that I have utilized a lot throughout this playthrough. And I know some of you are probably interested in that. First being the simple break spell that can break obsidian and things like that. It's a projectile. It shoots the break spell, amplifies it so that way it can break, well, with 1 it can break obsidian, with 2 it can break ancient debris, and then it puts it in our inventory. This was very helpful for farming ancient debris in the Nether, considering it is a projectile. Then we have the light spell. Very, very simple. It shoots a projectile that places a light, and that light is amplified, giving it the ability to shine as if it's glowstone. And we can place down near invisible lights with this, by the way, and pretty darn cool. Then we have just a very basic hurt spell. It's a projectile, harms, and then gets amplified. That one's pretty standard and pretty boring. But then we have a grow spell, and this acts as infinite bone mill. We can just basically use touch as our form, and then we use grow as our modifier or our effect, and it does work just like bone mill. Now we get into some really cool ones. This is the press, and this was a part of the Technica mod, which allows us to take things like iron, throw it on the ground, select our press glyph, and it literally presses. Like, it creates a create press right before our very eyes. And then we have my favorite spell of all time, the smelt spell, which if there's anything that needs to be smelted, for example, logs, we can set it to smelt and it just smelts those things up. It needs a furnace, am I right? Now 7 is quite honestly a troll. Yeah, this one's a troll. We have projectile wall with some AoE, making sure it's sensitive, so it targets the ground or blocks, and then firework with amplify, which does a firework that explodes. And yes, it's exactly what you think it is. Very chaotic and such a troll if you're in a cave with your friends. Then for number 8, we have my personal favorite, which is the boss killer. And we have pantomime with sensitive, amplify, conjure mage block, reduce time, reduce time, reduce time, reduce time again, and then leap, and then amplify. And what this cool spell does is it shoots a mage block that disappears. However, to be able to use this successfully, you also need a focus of block shaping. And yes, this creates the ability for us to shoot blocks, mage blocks specifically, out of our inventory, and as soon as they land, they immediately disintegrate. And this, by the way, this deals a significant amount of damage. Then we, of course, have Dash, which is a fantastic spell to use if you want to just simply get around, if you want to slam to the ground or what have you. Because of its ability to have feather fall, or slow fall at the end with some reduced time, we can literally cast ourselves directly into the ground and we take 0 fall damage, which is a beautiful spell. And then last but not least, 10, which is our test spell, which we played around with quite a bit. And this is interesting. This can basically, the obliterate can act as crushing wheels, but it also does some other things. If you amplify this thing all the way, it just creates like a massive, and I mean a massive hammer that slams down on anything that is in its way. For example, if I wanted to deal some damage over here to our test dummy, I can do that. Like, how absolutely crazy looking is that? It's so cool. I tell you, I love the Ars Spellbook, and I love the ability for you to essentially program your own things. And there's so many other wacky spells that you can do. But yeah, that concludes the Ars portion. Now we've got to talk about the thing that you've been seeing throughout the entire showcase of everything that has gone on. And that is the massive monorail that's running everywhere. But I could just set up a monorail without a monorail station. And so the final project was to automate several things and to make sure that we had all of our casings automated, just sort of putting the final wraps on everything, making sure we had a constant supply of andesite alloy and brass and train tracks and monorail tracks, casings of all different types. And I set all of that automation up in this building. Also, along with power needed to be able to access my refined storage cross-dimensionally. But I also wanted the monorail train, which this right here is just absolutely fantastic. I can sit on the seat and just sort of sit back and relax as we take our final journey with Slink, by the way, through all of our builds. That, my friends, was our final trip on the monorail system. And so I hope that you guys enjoyed this series, and I hope that somewhere along the way you might have learned something, as that is like one of my major goals when I make a video, is to hopefully teach something new to one of you, no matter if it was how a mod is interacting with another mod or what have you. That is always sort of my goal. Of course, get your world download if you're a supporter of any tier, and thanks to all of you who have subscribed throughout this series and or have subscribed and been subscribed over the years. And also thanks to all of you who did support throughout this series. You guys are absolutely amazing, and what make episodes like this and episodes that extend past 30 and so even possible. And thanks to all of my friends who hung out with me over on the Discord, you know, as we hung out and I streamed over there as I progressed through this. Thanks for all of the good chats. You know who you are. And with that, it's time to say goodbye. And as always, thanks for watching.